You're watching Double Standards with me, Afshin Ratansi. This week, the British government want to bug your mobile phone, and Gaddafi wants his money back. Coming up in the show as the Notting Hill Carnival gets underway, Brother Omar Wale from the Pan-African Society Community Forum on the continuing repercussions of the English riots. We get the latest from Libya as NATO continues its bombardment, and in a moment we talk to the new chief at the IMF about tea bags. Christine Lagarde, welcome to Double Standards. Do you want to speak French?
No, I will not speak French.
Are there other people there? Anyhow, you're the new chief at the IMF. What are you going to do to solve the crisis in capitalism?
As little as possible.
As little as possible?
The markets will do the job, and they will sort out the boys from the man, and the man from the boys.
Well, one man who has certainly been sorted is your friend Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who you've taken over from at the IMF. What did you think of the rape allegations? Is it true you set up a slush fund to help pay his legal bills?
In a matter of weeks, we had to set up companies, we had to reinvent, we had to reorganize.
And now you are at the center of a multi-million-dollar corruption probe involving you and President Sarkozy.
We had to transgress along the way. And that was the emergency measures that we had to take.
I see. Well, we have to wait for that inquiry to take its course. Meanwhile, I understand that since you joined the IMF, you want all services to be privatized and the IMF to own the public interest. You've even made everyone retrain as firemen.
What's my message? We've done a lot as a fire brigade.
But IMF austerity cuts in Athens, Lisbon, Dublin and now London mean riots and burning buildings. Viewers can see one on their screens right now. Will you build new ones?
We are working very hard at becoming decent architects.
Well, away from all that, how do you characterize the world economy?
Suddenly, we're on the verge of collapse and about to bring all of us along in the disaster. Times have changed.
And what would you say you have achieved so far?
That not much has been achieved. Look at what the markets are doing. Not much has been achieved because it's a long and tedious process.
What about inefficiency at the IMF? Describe the process of buying, say, paper clips at your offices.
Bring everybody around the table to make sure that there is consensus, that there is agreement, that everybody is going to move along, sometimes forgetting about their own vested interest and their respective competitive advantage.
Do you find it hard to get up in the morning?
It's tough.
Well, where did you get the idea of the IMF needing its own army, navy and air force to enforce IMF austerity measures, for instance?
And for moving in financial circles and from attending many of those G20s, G7, GX
Well, to one of the
meetings.
most powerful women in the world, good luck on the corruption inquiry and thank you for coming on Double Standards.
I would like to finish with a quote. Two quotes, actually. I will use one from President Roosevelt, who once said, "A woman is like a tea bag."
Well, I think we better cut you off there before the second quote. Thank you once again for coming on the show. If you understood the IMF chief's quote, email us at comment@doublestandardstv.com. Well, the world economy is as usual in turmoil. Over here, the government is jailing children, evicting the parents of children who were caught up in the riots, and planning to shut down social networking sites.
Everyone watching these horrific actions will be struck by how they were organised via social media. Free flow of information can be used for good, but it can also be used for ill. So we are working with the police, the intelligence services and industry to look at whether it would be right to stop people communicating via these websites and services.
One service is on the BlackBerry mobile phone.
Most importantly, through the BlackBerry Messenger network. Whilst it's relatively easy for police to monitor the internet, BBM's secure encoding makes it difficult to tap. It's believed, but not confirmed, the Meta in talks with BlackBerry manufacturer Research in Motion to gain access to their network, and that the force has moles who are beginning to intercept.
Intercept what? Why are the British government tapping everyone's phones? You'd think David Cameron had enough trouble with phone hacking, what with Rupert Murdoch and BlackBerries. Well, we tracked down some rioters to find out how they use these BlackBerries.
Since the bulk of this recipe is the BlackBerry, you're going to want yours to be fresh, preferably hand-picked straight from a BlackBerry tree.
The police will have a tough time intercepting those BlackBerries. What are they talking about? Well, with me is Brother Omowale of the Pan-African Society Community Forum to give us his insight into the recent rioting across Britain. Brother Omowale, welcome to Double Standards.
Warmest greetings.
What has been your interpretation so far of the aftermath of the rioting?
Well, actually, I'm one of those that goes back to the beginning. And for me, the beginning is the murder of our son, Mark Duggan. Mark was murdered by police. In addition to murdering him, they then lied on him and made out that he tried to shoot them and put out all kinds of false stories in collusion with the IPCC.
Although they deny that. Just to go into more detail there, that was because they initially said that he had fired, there was an exchange of fire.
This was the lie. This was the lie that was told, yeah. And this was the lie that was perpetrated by the IPCC, by the capitalist media, etc., etc., and just pushed out around the world to make our son look as though he was the one that was responsible for his own death.
Well, the police, the IPCC, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, did say afterwards they didn't really understand why the initial statement about it being an exchange of fire was given. Mm-hmm. That didn't satisfy you?
No, it doesn't. I mean, the IPCC was established on April Fool's Day, the 1st of April 2004, and it's been a cruel joke ever since. The police go around murdering people, mainly African people actually, on a regular basis, and the IPCC's job is to cover up those murders. And it does it by, keeping it out of the news or putting out false information, etc., and pretending that there's some kind of investigation that goes on for 2 or 3 years until it goes out of the short-term memories of the general public.
But of course, so many people said that the rioting that occurred in so many other different cities had nothing to do with the shooting, the murdering of Mark Duggan.
I mean, there are a lot of people that are specifically putting out false information. As an African with children, I know that our young people are really being given a hard time at the moment. The police, we have a situation where in schools, for instance, our children are excluded from school. Even if they manage to stay in school, the general standard for them is that they are failed inside the school system. On top of that, police are now brought into schools where our children are, with a view to criminalising them, from the early stages. Out on the streets, what we have is something called stop and search, where our children, according to the Guardian newspaper, are stopped and searched 26 times more frequently than their European counterparts. And those stop and searches can be quite brutal. Some of our children have been beaten in that process. We've had examples of our children with their trousers being pulled down in the street as part of an apparent stop and search. Our children are actually being terrorised.
To which the police always say, well, crime is disproportionately created by black people, and they also say that what has robbing Foot Locker and these sorts of shops got to do with perhaps legitimate concerns over the sus laws against black people?
You see, the uprising that happens in any kind of revolutionary type situation will have people who are politically sincere, but it will also have its opportunists. And so there will be people who use it as an opportunity to go shopping. Some of our children went shopping. They didn't use the usual currency of, pound notes. Maybe they used baseball bats or whatever they could find to break in and procure the things for themselves that they wanted, the things that they normally don't have access to and can't afford. Now, I'm not going to condemn even that behaviour, because if I have to have a choice between having a few shops broken down and the life of our children spared, I would go for the lives of our children spared. If Mark Duggan had not been murdered, none of this would have happened.
So why do you think there is such a disconnect then? Because so many pundits on television, so many MPs, although strangely enough the opposition Labour Party has seemed to have made some slight adjustment to their policies in understanding why people should loot a shop. What do you see as the big disconnect there? Because people are being put in prison now for stealing a bottle of water, for putting a status update on Facebook. Why do you think there is such a disconnect? Because lots of people say people should be jailed for stealing half a bottle of mineral water.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I'm going to be kind to the likes of David Cameron, to the likes of Nick Clegg, to the likes of the Miliband, and to the likes of Boris Johnson, I would just describe them as thick. Because it's obvious that if you come and kill my family, I will not love you. That must be obvious.
This weekend is the largest street fair festival in Europe, the Notting Hill Carnival. It's changed many times over the years. It was famous or infamous because of the 1958 riots.
Of course, we should never mention the Notting Hill Carnival without mentioning Claudia Jones, that great African woman, leader of the African community at that time, after Kelso Cochrane was murdered in a racist riot where Europeans went berserk and attacked a man with his hand in a sling. One of the responses to that was the Notting Hill Carnival. I was there when the uprising happened in Notting Hill Carnival in 1976 and 1977. I didn't go in 1978 fearing that there would be violence again, but it started going again in the 1980s.
And then there were riots in the 2000s as well.
Well, you see, I call them uprisings. Riots are without purpose, almost, and there's no meaning to them. But uprisings recognise that when a people are oppressed and can take no more, they rise up to defend themselves. Wherever there is oppression, there will be resistance.
So not sheer criminality, as was characterised by the British Prime Minister. Brother Omoala, thank you so much for coming on Double Standards.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, as Britain riots because of cutbacks, it continues to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on wars around the world, including against Libya. France, too, is targeting Libya's Muammar Gaddafi. But I bet they hadn't counted on Gaddafi storming Paris to get his money back. Well, the onslaught on Libya from NATO continues. Just a few months ago, Gaddafi's friends were the very leaders of the countries now trying to kill him. Here he is with the then UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown at a dinner with President Obama and Silvio Berlusconi, and here with the great and the good of NATO's leaders. Here he is standing right next to the UN's Secretary General himself. Routinely, Gaddafi is now called a dictator as the bombs rain down on Libya. While there is no doubt that his regime embraced neoliberal capitalism in recent years, let's examine two scenarios with two leaders and try and figure out which is the police state. Well, you decide which is the police state then, and who needs more protecting from the people they're supposed to serve. Libya is located in northern Africa and borders the Mediterranean Sea, Egypt, Sudan, Chad, Niger, Algeria and Tunisia. The country is around 2 million square kilometers and most of that is desert with fertile land on the Mediterranean shore. Libya has a population of around 6.5 million and holds the largest proven oil reserves in Africa, and had an estimated GDP growth before NATO bombardment, and according to the IMF, of 6.2%. The country has endured thousands of airstrikes from NATO since March. 18 countries are involved in the campaign. Before the latest developments in Libya, I interviewed Humanitarian and Emergency Aid Consultant Moeen Raoof, who had just returned from the Libyan capital. I spoke to him since I recorded the interview. He said, "In my view, African and Asian governments have been put on notice that the United Nations is no longer acting in their interests, but that of the permanent members of the UN Security Council, in particular France, the United Kingdom and the United States of America, with NATO as its muscle or enforcer. I fear there is worse to come for Libyans and the whole North African region." That's what he said. A warning to viewers, though, that some of the images in this interview are disturbing. Moeen Raoof, welcome to Double Standards. You're a former soldier. You served in Germany, Falklands, Canada, Belize, so many United Nations institutions. You've been in Tripoli in the past 2 weeks.
Thank you for inviting me. Gaddafi is very popular. There are 6.5 million people in Libya. Over 5 million people support their sovereign government. Gaddafi doesn't hold elected office. But they support Gaddafi because he's a revolutionary hero. He's an African revolutionary hero.
Why does all the intelligence that NATO receives, this government receives, say the opposite?
Well, they have to, don't they? Because they want to get rid of the man. They've already made a statement. He's run away to Venezuela, or he's killing his own people. He hasn't. He doesn't hold official office. He doesn't make decisions about what the government does or does not do.
So who are these people in the eastern part of Libya who not only now have money, as well as air support and this UN Resolution 1973 on their side? Characterize who this opposition is. We don't really hear about them.
You mean the NATO air wing of the NTC? The NTC,
the Great Liberation Movement of Libya, is what they call themselves.
Oh yeah, maybe they total maybe 20,000. Out of 6.5 million, there may be 20,000 of these people. They have no real power. They have no popularity among the citizens of Libya. They are monarchists who've come back from exile, who lived in Europe or America. They have no power at all, no support among the people. Then you have the NTC, the 3 ministers who defected, who, by the way, were going to be exposed for corruption.
So why is it so many journalists from so many different organizations are in Benghazi right now reporting exactly the opposite interpretation of the one you're giving me?
Do you know, since General Yunus was killed, most of the journalists have left Benghazi, by the way, because there's been a lot of infighting and they've been killing each other. There's a lot of talk of revenge killings. Actually, we don't know what's really happening in Benghazi.
You might have to just remind our audience about General Yunus, because...
Yeah, General Yunus was one of the revolutionary heroes of the 69 revolution in Libya, when the monarchy was toppled by Muammar Gaddafi. He has been on Muammar's side since, until recently when he defected to Benghazi. He was head of the army in Benghazi, and he was murdered recently, or assassinated, if you like. And he was a very powerful man. His tribe is very powerful, and they've sworn revenge, and they've been killing each other in Benghazi.
We'll get on to his assassination, but
right.
Why would someone as revolutionary as that, overthrowing the British-backed government from back in the 60s, have defected?
We don't really know what the circumstances were. Maybe his family was threatened, maybe he was convinced that this is the right thing to do. No one really knows what happened, and that's why they suspect he was murdered, because he had not really defected, but no one really knows. There's a lot of confusion. The NTC are in exile, essentially. Mustafa Abdul Jalil, whom they now call Abdul NATO, is in Turkey. He's not even in Benghazi, because he's under, they've threatened to kill him. He knew about the arrest of General Yunus, so he's not actually living or sleeping in Benghazi at all. He's brought in when they need him, and there's a contradiction again. UN Security Council Resolution 1973 has imposed a no-fly zone, yet daily into Benghazi come in cargo flights. NATO's flying in cargo.
Well, I think from the statements of foreign secretaries and world leaders supporting this, it's pretty obvious they're on the side against Gaddafi.
Right.
There's nothing about 1973 that means they're impartial. A lot of money has been going that way. Of course, some people make criticisms of the Gaddafi family for taking money, and we know that, the Financial Times here in London, their assets have had to be stopped frozen, in the sense of their shares, because, of course, the Gaddafi family owned part of the Financial Times. What about the billions that William Hague proudly said should be the transitional councils?
Well, do you know Muammar Gaddafi doesn't even have a bank account? It's all state-owned money. It belongs to the Libyan people, or the state. So this is a myth that all the money belongs to the Gaddafi family. None of the money belongs to the Gaddafi family. It belongs to the state of Libya, and they've declared it. They've said so, that it belongs to Libya. But the other contradiction is that they refuse to accept the fact that the money cannot be given to 20,000 people who have declared themselves as freedom fighters, when over 6 million people are opposing them.
Were you surprised?
Completely. Well,
I don't think anything like it's ever happened before. Some people have said that the British Foreign Office, in making this decision, has set an unusual precedent.
Completely. I mean, this is the first time a terrorist group, a rough bunch of people with different ideologies have been brought together and declared as a legitimate government. This is a very dangerous precedent for this earth, because that means tomorrow we can go into, I don't know, Bolivia, or we can go into South Africa and declare 20 people as the legitimate
or the
government.
Rioters in Tripoli.
Oh, completely, completely. Those could be recognized as a legitimate government, as a tweeter said.
Now, about your personal experiences of actually witnessing the results of these airstrikes for peace.
Yes,
say that
the humanitarian airstrikes.
Airstrikes.
Yeah, completely killing babies and children, which destruction of property. It's okay to destroy properties and
there's propaganda on both sides here. Are you absolutely sure that what you were seeing was the result of NATO airstrikes?
Look, if
you have a lot of experience of wars.
Yeah, completely. If I thought even for a moment that the government, the sovereign government, the legitimate government in Tripoli was doing wrong things, and I had seen that, I would have told you, I think they're doing wrong things. They're not. We haven't seen that. We were given access to go everywhere we want, we asked to go. They're not killing people. But to get back to the point, the rioters here are destroying property, they've killed people, but it's okay for young British soldiers.
But what about what the press is saying here, that people who are in Tripoli, journalists, were deliberately being shown around for propaganda reasons, places to discredit the NATO operations?
They are being shown areas where NATO has bombed, where people have been killed, and they can't be taken anywhere else. Where else do they want to be taken? But they're not reporting the truth. They're all sitting in Rixos Hotel, and they are, despite knowing the facts, they're refusing to report.
It's quite an allegation to make that this government's army, air force, are right now murdering children.
They are, but they are. NATO is murdering children, civilians. They're bombing civilian residential areas, and they're calling them command and control centers. That's absolutely wrong. This is against international law, but we can't do a thing about it because we have no voices. That's why on the streets people riot, because they don't have a voice. How can you deny 6 million people electricity and access to fuel, access to basics, medicines, food? You can't do that.
Moeen, thank you so much for coming to Double Standards and giving us such a different view of events in Libya. We'll love to have you on next time you return from Tripoli.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, that's certainly not the news we're getting from the corporate media about the war on Libya. That's it for this week. You can email us at comment@doublestandardstv.com. I'll leave you with President Obama. See you next week.
I'm feeling kind of fired up. I'm feeling like I'm ready to go. Chicka chicka boom boom. Chicka chicka. Chicka 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 boom boom. Chicka chicka. Chicka 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 boom boom. What kind of money? Obama money. Boom boom. Chicka 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 boom boom.
We said D to EFG. I'll beat you to the top.
She's stealing my thunder. She's stealing my thunder. She's stealing my thunder. Oh, skit scat scoodle doot. Flip flop flea. Skinny D and stub toe E. Skit scat scattle doot. flip flop flee, wiggle jiggle free. But chicka chicka boom boom. Look, there's a full moon. Chicka chicka boom boom. Thank you, everybody.